What would you do if the man who broke you invited you to his wedding, not because he wanted peace, but because he wanted witnesses? Avery Collins stood in the rain outside the saint room, clutching an invitation that said her name and two cruel words, and guessed. Carter Whitmore had not just replaced her. He had saved her an empty seat beside her own humiliation. Inside waited Luca Moretti, the most feared man in New Orleans, a man senators avoided, cops whispered about, and women with common sense never approached. But Avery was done being sensible. She needed him for one night, one wedding, one lie powerful enough to make every polished smile in that room crack. But when Luca Moretti said yes, he didn't agree to pretend. He agreed to change everything. Like this video comment, where you're watching from, and stay until the end. The door Luca Moretti opened did not feel like an entrance at first. It felt like a mistake Avery Collins had made, with wet hair, shaking hands, and grief dressed up as courage. The saint room closed behind her with a quiet click, but that sound followed her all the way home. Jonah Cruz drove her through New Orleans without asking questions. The city slid past the tinted window in broken gold and rain-soaked blue. Jazz leaked from doorways in the French Quarter. A man in a soaked linen shirt laughed too loudly under an awning. Two tourists ran across the street holding a plastic bag over their heads, as if weather could be negotiated with enough optimism. Avery sat in the back seat with her purse in her lap, and the wedding invitation hidden inside it like a live thing. Her phone buzzed 3 times before she looked down. Maya Brooks. Did he laugh you out of the building, or do I need to identify your body? Avery stared at the message until the letters softened at the edges. Then she typed back. He said yes. The reply came almost instantly. I am sorry. My phone must be drunk. Did you just say the most feared man in New Orleans agreed to attend Carter Whitmore's wedding with you? Avery leaned her head against the cold window. Yes, Maya called before Avery could breathe. Avery answered on the second ring. Start talking, Maya said, and leave out nothing except the crimes that might get me subpoenaed. Avery looked toward the front seat. Jonah's eyes stayed on the road. His face gave away nothing. He wants 13 days, Avery said. Silence. Then Maya said very carefully, Avery, I know. No, I do not think you do. When a normal man wants 13 days, he is planning a vacation or avoiding commitment. When Luca Moretti wants 13 days, someone is probably going to end up under a bridge. He said, I don't need a date. Maya exhaled. That is the first sensible thing I have heard. He said I need to learn how to enter a room like it owes me an apology. Maya went quiet again. That was worse than yelling. Outside Canal Street glowed under the rain. The driver turned away from the lights toward the quieter streets where old houses leaned behind iron gates and the city seemed to listen more than speak. Finally, Maya said, And is that what you want? Avery pressed her fingers against the strap of her purse. The invitation was in there. So was the small velvet pouch that held her grandmother's ring looped through a thin gold chain. She had almost offered it to Luca tonight. Almost placed the last piece of Nora Collins into the hands of a man whose name sounded like a warning. I do not know what I want, Avery whispered. That is not true. Avery closed her eyes. Maya's voice softened. You know exactly what you want. You just hate that wanting it makes you feel small. The words landed too close to the wound. Avery looked out the window and saw her own reflection looking back. Damp hair, tired eyes, a woman who had walked into a mafia club because an invitation had made her feel like a joke. I want him to regret it, she said. Maya did not answer right away. Then, very softly, Of course you do. The memory came with the rain. Carter Whitmore had ended their engagement in a restaurant on St. Charles Avenue where the napkins were folded like white birds and the waiters knew when not to interrupt people with money. Avery had known something was wrong before Carter said a word, because he had chosen a table in the back. Carter loved being seen. He loved bright rooms, glass walls, and center tables where donors could notice him laughing at the right moment. He loved walking into places like he had been expected. That night he sat with his back to the wall and both hands folded beside a glass of wine he had not touched. Avery remembered the candle between them. She remembered the rain ticking softly against the front windows. She remembered the waiter smiling at Carter like he belonged there and smiling at her like she had been allowed in because somebody generous had made a mistake. Ave Carter had said. Her name sounded practiced in his mouth. She placed her napkin in her lap. "You are scaring me." His expression tightened with that careful sadness he used when he wanted to seem kind before being cruel. "My father's campaign is entering a difficult stage." Avery stared at him. "All right. There are expectations now. Donors, alliances, families watching every decision." She felt her heart understand before her mind gave it permission. "Say it," she said. Carter looked down at the table. "Madeline Ashford's father has influence in Baton Rouge. Real influence. Her family and mine have discussed a possible arrangement." Avery laughed once. It was not a pretty sound. An arrangement. "Do not do that. Do what make it ugly." She pulled her hand back before he could touch it. "I did not make it ugly. You did." His jaw flexed. "This is not about your worth." "That is interesting," she said. "Because it feels exactly like a price tag." He looked annoyed then. Not ashamed. Annoyed. That hurt more than the betrayal, because shame would have meant some part of him still understood he was doing something wrong. "You are being emotional. I am your fiancé." He closed his eyes. "Were." The word slipped out too fast. The restaurant seemed to tilt. Carter reached for her hand, but Avery moved it into her lap. She did not trust herself not to break if he touched her. "I did not mean it that way," he said. "Yes, you did." He leaned forward and lowered his voice. "You are wonderful. You are kind and steady and good." Avery looked at the candle. The flame blurred until it became two. "You are describing a chair. I am trying to explain that this is bigger than us." "No," she said. "It is smaller than us. It is just dressed better." His face hardened. Then he said the things she would hear for months afterward in grocery store lines, in courthouse elevators, in the silence of her own bedroom. "You were never built for the life I am stepping into." Avery did not cry in front of him. She paid for the wine he did not drink because his card was declined by a bank security hold, and he looked embarrassed enough for both of them. She walked home in heels that cut the backs of her ankles raw. She took off her engagement ring in the kitchen and placed it beside a stack of unpaid bills. Then she sat on the floor until sunrise with her coat still on and her hands empty. 2 weeks later, the invitation arrived. Cream paper, gold lettering, heavy enough to feel like a verdict. Carter Whitmore and Madeline Ashford requested the honor of her presence. Avery read it once, then again. Then she saw the line beneath her name, Avery Collins and guest. That was the part that made her sit down. Not Carter's name beside Madeline's, not the wedding date. Not the embossed crest of two old families pretending marriage was love when everyone knew it was strategy. And guest. As if they knew she would have no one. As if they had printed the empty space beside her name just to show her where she had failed to matter. She put the invitation in the kitchen drawer with batteries, rubber bands, takeout menus, and birthday candles from years she no longer remembered celebrating. Then she opened that drawer every night for 16 days. By the time Jonah pulled up outside Avery's building, the rain had thinned to mist. She lived above a bakery in the Marini in a second-floor apartment with narrow stairs and a front door that stuck when the weather changed. Downstairs, the bakery windows were dark, but the air still smelled faintly of butter and sugar. Someone had left a bag of flour near the back entrance. A stray cat sat on top of it like a tiny king guarding a white kingdom. Jonah stepped out and opened her door. Avery looked at him. "I can open a car door. I believe you." He did not move. She got out. The sidewalk shone under the streetlight. Her shoes clicked against the wet concrete. At the building entrance, she turned back. Does he do this often? Jonah's face did not change. Do what say yes to strange women who ask him to ruin weddings? No. The answer should have made her feel foolish. Instead, it made her feel worse. Upstairs, her apartment smelled like coffee ground sugar and the lemon cleaner she used when she needed to feel in control of something. A yellow lamp glowed near the sofa. Her work tote sat beside the tiny dining table stuffed with legal files nobody had asked her to bring home. A chipped mug waited in the sink. On the wall, a framed photograph of her grandmother Nora showed a woman with silver hair, laughing eyes, and hands that looked strong enough to wring truth out of the world. Avery locked the door, then the deadbolt, then the chain. Only then did she let her shoulders fall. Her apartment was not peaceful. It was familiar. There was a difference. She kicked off her shoes and saw the red marks on her heels from where the wet leather had rubbed. For a moment, she was back on that long walk home after Carter bleeding into expensive shoes and refusing to limp because she had already given him enough of her dignity. Her phone buzzed again. "Maya, I am coming over," Avery typed with one thumb. "No," Maya replied. That was not a question. Avery looked toward the kitchen drawer. The invitation was still in her purse, but she could feel it from across the room. It had become part of the apartment now. A pulse inside paper. She typed. "I am tired," Maya replied. "You are heartbroken and negotiating with criminals. Tired is not the headline." Avery almost smiled. Almost. She set the phone down and walked to the small mirror near the hallway. Her reflection looked like someone who had survived the evening by accident. Damp hair clung to her cheek. Her mascara had blurred beneath one eye. Her cream blouse was wrinkled from rain and nerves. She touched the chain at her neck. Nora's ring rested beneath her collar. The gold was old and warm from her skin. A small blue stone sat at the center, not expensive enough to impress anyone like Evelyn Whitmore, but stubbornly bright. Nora Collins had raised Avery in a shotgun house with peeling paint and tomato plants growing in coffee cans on the back steps. She had worked nights cleaning offices downtown and days selling pies to neighbors who paid late and called her sweetheart when they wanted a discount. Nora never raised her voice unless someone mistook kindness for permission. Avery was 7 when she first heard her grandmother say it. They were in the kitchen. Flour dusted the table. Rain tapped the roof. Avery sat with her knees tucked beneath her while Nora rolled pie dough with strong, steady hands. A man from the property office had come by that morning demanding fees Nora did not owe. He had smiled the whole time, called her ma'am, called her reasonable, called her sweet. After he left, Avery asked why her grandmother looked so angry. Nora pressed the rolling pin into the dough and said, "People will call you sweet when they mean easy." Avery had blinked at her. Nora looked up. "Do not help them." Avery had not understood then. Carter taught her later. He did it slowly. At first, his corrections arrived wrapped in affection. The first time he told her not to wear a certain dress to dinner with his mother, he kissed her forehead afterward. "You are beautiful," he said. "I just want them to see you the way I do." So she changed. The first time he asked her not to mention her father's bankruptcy around donors, he held her hand. "They can be judgmental," he said. "I am protecting you." So she stayed quiet. The first time he told her to say legal assistant instead of paralegal because it sounded cleaner. She laughed because she thought he was teasing. He did not laugh. At first, Avery thought love meant being willing to learn someone else's world. Then one day she realized she had become a guest in her own life. She stopped ordering food she liked because Carter preferred lighter things. She bought dresses in colors Evelyn called tasteful. She laughed softer, spoke less, smiled when older men interrupted her, said thank you when people gave her advice she had not requested. Every compromise was small enough to survive. Together, they became disappearance. A knock sounded at the door. Avery startled so hard her hand flew to her chest. Maya's voice came through the wood. "I know you are in there. Your light is on and you are terrible at pretending you are asleep." Avery opened the door. Maya Brooks stood in the hallway holding 2 paper cups of coffee and wearing a raincoat the color of marigolds. Her curls were pulled up messily and her expression was the kind of worried that had put on anger because anger was easier to carry. She pushed 1 cup into Avery's hand and walked inside. "You smell like rich men and bad decisions," Maya said. Avery closed the door. "Good evening to you too." Maya looked her over. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Did anyone threaten you?" Avery paused. Maya's eyes narrowed. "That was too long. No one threatened me directly. I hate every word in that sentence." Avery sat on the arm of the sofa. Maya stayed standing as if sitting would make the situation seem less urgent. "Tell me exactly what happened." So Avery did. She told Maya about the black door, the silent guards, the club that felt like a secret everyone in power pretended not to know. She told her about Luca Moretti sitting under amber light like a man carved from warning signs. She told her about the invitation on the table, about his voice, about the way he saw too much without seeming curious. When she reached the part about 13 days, Maya closed her eyes. "I am going to say something as your best friend. You have never once asked permission for that." "Correct. This is why our friendship works." Maya opened her eyes. "This is a terrible idea." "I know. No, you do not. You know Carter is terrible. You know humiliation is terrible. You know walking into that wedding alone would hurt. But Luca Moretti is not a revenge dress with cheekbones. He is dangerous." Avery looked at the coffee in her hands. The lid was warm. Her fingers still felt cold. "I know he is dangerous." Maya sat across from her. "No. You like that he is dangerous because it makes Carter feel smaller. That is not the same as knowing what danger does when it follows you home." Avery had no answer. Maya softened then. "I hate Carter," she said. "I hate his mother. I hate that invitation. I hate that they made you feel like being loved by them was some kind of scholarship you lost." Avery's throat tightened. "But you are not weak because they hurt you." "I feel weak. I know." Avery laughed quietly, but it broke in the middle. "I stood outside that club tonight and almost left. I kept thinking, what kind of woman does this? What kind of woman asks a man like Luca Moretti to pretend to want her just so people stop pitying her?" Maya's face changed. "A woman who has been punished for wanting to be seen." The room went still. Avery looked away first. Outside tires hissed on wet pavement. Somewhere below, the stray cat knocked something over near the bakery door. The city kept moving, rude and alive. Maya leaned forward. "Do you want Carter back?" "No." The answer came faster than Avery expected. Maya studied her. "Do you still love him?" Avery thought of Carter at the restaurant. Carter at fundraisers. Carter smoothing his tie in the mirror while telling her to change her shoes. Carter saying she was good and steady, like those were gifts, until they became reasons to leave. "I think I loved who I was trying to become for him," Avery said. "That is the part that still hurts." Maya nodded slowly. "That makes more sense. It does not feel better. Sense rarely does at first." Avery stood and walked to the kitchen. She opened the drawer. The invitation lay on top of everything bright and cruel. Maya came to stand beside her. Avery picked it up. The paper felt expensive because it was made to. Everything about Carter's world was designed to make ordinary people aware of their hands. His mother chose this, Avery said. Probably. She knew exactly what that line would do. Maya did not pretend not to understand. Yes. Evelyn Whitmore had never raised her voice at Avery. She did not need to. Her disapproval moved quietly through seating arrangements. Paused smiles and compliments sharp enough to draw blood. Once, at a charity luncheon, Evelyn had touched Avery's elbow and said, "You have such a sincere quality. It is refreshing in small doses." Carter laughed. Avery laughed too, because she had not yet learned that joining in your own humiliation does not make it hurt less. Maya took the invitation from Avery's hand and read it. "Avery Collins and guest," she said. The words sounded uglier out loud. Avery wrapped her arms around herself. "I want to walk in there and not give them the satisfaction." Maya looked at her. "Then do that, with Luca." Maya sighed. "Apparently with Luca." Avery looked up. "You are not going to try to stop me. I am going to try. I just know your stubborn face." Maya handed the invitation back. "So I am shifting strategies. To what, keeping you alive and emotionally literate." Despite herself, Avery smiled. Maya pointed at her. "Do not fall for him. I am not stupid. That is not the same thing." Avery's smile faded. Maya hugged her, then hard and sudden. For a second, Avery stood stiffly. Then she folded into it. The coffee cup pressed awkwardly between them. Rain tapped against the window. Avery breathed in Maya's floral perfume and the faint scent of stems and soil from her shop. "You do not have to prove you survived, Carter," Maya said against her shoulder. Avery closed her eyes. "I know." But she did not know. Not yet. After Maya left, Avery did not sleep. She lay in bed while the old building settled around her. Pipes knocked in the walls. A motorcycle growled down the street. The bakery below began its work before dawn, and soon the air filled with butter, yeast, and sugar. Her phone lit up at 7:58. Unknown number. Outside. One word. No greeting. No punctuation. No softness. Avery sat up. Her heart started before the rest of her did. She typed back, "I thought we said 8. The reply came immediately. "We did." She looked at the clock. 7:59. Another message arrived. "Now." Avery stared at the screen. "Unbelievable," she muttered. She dressed in black trousers, a white blouse, and the only blazer she owned that did not look like it belonged to a woman apologizing before a meeting began. Before leaving, she stood in front of the mirror and fastened Nora's ring around her neck. The blue stone caught the weak morning light. Avery touched it once. "Do not help them," she whispered. Downstairs, a black SUV waited at the curb. Jonah Cruz stood beside the rear door in a dark suit holding an umbrella like he had been born bored by weather. "Miss Collins," he said. "Does he always summon people like an angry king?" Jonah opened the door. "Only when they agree to impossible things." Avery climbed in. The SUV pulled away from the curb and carried her through a waking New Orleans. Delivery trucks blocked narrow streets. A woman hosed down the sidewalk outside a bar that would be loud again by midnight. The sun rose pale over rooftops still wet from rain. The city looked different from the back seat of Luca Moretti's car. Cleaner somehow. Farther away. As if glass and money could turn real life into scenery. "Where are we going?" Avery asked. Jonah glanced back. "Mr. Moretti's residence. Does he have just one no?" That was not really an answer. It was the safest version of one. Avery looked out the window. They crossed toward the river where warehouses gave way to renovated brick buildings, private garages, and glass towers that looked too sharp for the old city around them. The SUV stopped beneath a building facing the Mississippi. A doorman opened the entrance before Jonah reached it. No one asked Avery who she was. That unsettled her more than if they had. Inside the lobby smelled like stone flowers and money that had never worried about rent. The elevator required Jonah's card a code and his thumb against a scanner. Avery watched the numbers climb. 26, 27, 28. Her palms began to sweat. When the doors opened, they did not open into a hallway. They opened directly into Luca Moretti's penthouse. For a moment, Avery forgot to step out. The space was enormous and silent. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked over the river gray and silver beneath the morning sky. The furniture was dark, low-expensive, and severe. The walls held paintings that looked like storms trapped in oil. There were no family photographs, no books left open, no shoes by the door. Nothing that suggested a person lived there because he wanted to. It looked like a place built for control. A woman stood near the entry, silver hair pinned at the back of her head, black dress, immaculate posture perfect. "Miss Collins," she said, "I am Beatrice Vale. I manage Mr. Moretti's household." Avery nodded. "Nice to meet you." Mrs. Vale's eyes moved over Avery's blazer shoes, purse, and the ring at her throat. Not judging, measuring. "Mr. Moretti is in the dining room. He dislikes lateness, unnecessary dramatics, and people who confuse volume with strength." Avery glanced at Jonah. Jonah said, "She likes you." Mrs. Vale turned and walked away. Avery followed through the penthouse, each step sounding too sharp against the polished floor. Luca sat at the end of a long dining table with a tablet in one hand and a cup of coffee beside him. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. No jacket, no tie. Somehow that made him look more dangerous. A plate waited across from him. Eggs, toast, fruit arranged with the kind of precision that made breakfast feel accused of something. "You are late," Luca said without looking up. Avery stopped beside the chair. "I was downstairs at 8. "You were in the elevator at 8. Do you practice being impossible, or does it come naturally?" He looked up then. Something almost touched his mouth. Not a smile. The threat of one. "Sit." Avery sat because she was hungry, and because refusing would have felt childish, and because Luca Moretti looked like a man who expected obedience so completely that denying him might become addictive. Mrs. Vale poured coffee into a white cup and placed it near Avery's hand. Avery took a sip. It was bitter enough to feel personal. She coughed. Luca returned his attention to the tablet. "You will get used to it. I would rather not build character through coffee." From somewhere near the sideboard, Mrs. Vale made a small sound. Her face stayed perfectly still, but Avery was almost certain she had laughed. Luca set the tablet down. "Tell me about Carter Whitmore." Avery's fingers tightened around the cup. "What do you want to know?" "Everything you do not want to say." "That is invasive. Yes. At least pretend to be polite. I do not waste manners on surgery." Avery stared at him. The room was too quiet. The river moved beyond the glass. Jonah stood near the far wall reading something on his phone with the calm indifference of a man who had heard worse things over breakfast. Avery looked down at her plate. "We met at work," she said. "His mother hired the firm for a donor issue. Carter came in to review documents. He asked me where the conference room was. I pointed. He said I had kind eyes." Luca's expression did not change. "What kind eyes," he said, "is what men say when they want a woman to feel seen without doing the work of seeing her." The accuracy made her angry. "He was good to me at first. I am sure." "He was." "Then tell me." So she did. She told him about the first 6 months. Carter bringing flowers to her office. Carter waiting in his car after work because he said he liked watching her come down the steps. Carter taking her to museums, river walks, brunches where the orange juice cost more than Avery used to spend on lunch. She told Luca how Carter spoke about public service with a shine in his eyes that made ambition seem almost holy. She told him about the way he used to place his hand at the small of her back in crowded rooms, how she once mistook that for pride instead of ownership. Then she told him how it changed, slowly. Not that dress, not that joke. Do not say broke. Say financially complicated. Do not mention your father. Laugh softer. Stand closer. Do not speak so much when donors ask questions. Do not look bored when men explain things they barely understand. Do not call my mother Evelyn unless she asks you to. Do not make that face. Do not be difficult. Do not be so sensitive. It happened so gradually, Avery said. At first I thought he was helping me. Then one day I realized I had become a version of myself that existed mostly to avoid embarrassing him. Luca watched her in silence. Avery hated how easy it was to keep speaking. Maybe because he did not interrupt. Maybe because his attention was not warm, but it was complete. Carter had listened like a man waiting to correct the ending. Luca listened like a man gathering evidence. He said I was steady. Avery continued. Comfortable. Good. Near the end, those words stopped sounding like compliments. Luca's jaw moved once. And you believed him. Avery gave a small laugh. Was he wrong? Yes. The answer came so quickly she looked at him. Luca's voice stayed low. Steady is not empty. Comfortable is not worthless. Good is what weak men call women when they have mistaken peace for boredom. Her throat tightened. She looked away first. The river beyond the windows moved bright and careless. You do not even know me, she said. I know enough to recognize a woman who spent years translating disrespect into compromise. The room went still around that sentence. Avery set her cup down carefully. Is this how the 13 days are going to be? Yes. Brutal honesty over breakfast, among other things. I might hate you by the wedding. That will make the performance more believable. Despite herself, Avery smiled. It vanished quickly, but not before Luca saw it. He always seemed to see too much. After breakfast, Luca stood. Avery looked up. Where are we going? He did not answer. He walked toward the windows, then stopped in the wide open space between the dining room and the sitting area. Morning light cut across the floor in pale bands. Walk to the elevator, he said. Avery blinked. Walk? Yes. That is your grand plan. For the next minute, yes. She exhaled, annoyed, and walked across the room. When she reached the elevator, Luca said, Again. Avery turned. What was wrong with that everything? Specific. Encouraging. You lead with your head down. Your shoulders fold inward. Your steps are too small. You move like you are trying not to disturb the air. Heat rose into her face. I am just walking. No, Luca said. You are apologizing for taking up space. The words hit harder than they should have. Avery looked toward the windows so he would not see her face change. But he did. Of course he did. His voice lowered. People like the Whitmores build rooms designed to make everyone else feel grateful for being allowed inside. If you enter like a guest, they will treat you like a favor. If you enter like a woman who belongs, they will wonder who gave you the key. Avery turned back toward the far end of the room. Her feet hurt from yesterday's shoes. Her heart still ached from the memory of Carter. Her pride was tender and angry and tired of being touched. She lifted her chin. Then she walked again. It felt ridiculous. It felt false. It felt like wearing someone else's bones. Luca watched without speaking until she reached the elevator. Then he said, Again. Avery looked at him across the polished floor. Rain still clung somewhere inside her from the night before. Carter's invitation still waited in her purse. Maya's warning still echoed in her ears. And Luca Moretti stood in front of the river, dangerous, impossible, and certain, as if he had already seen the woman she was not sure she could become. Avery turned around, placed one foot in front of the other, and began again. Again became the shape of Avery's life. Every morning the black SUV waited outside the bakery before the sun had fully climbed over New Orleans. Every morning Jonah Cruz opened the door without asking whether she had changed her mind. Every morning Avery told herself she could still walk away, and every morning she stepped inside. By the fourth day, she stopped asking where they were going. There was no need. The answer was always the same. Luca's penthouse, Luca's rules, Luca's gaze. The first lesson had been walking. The second was standing. Avery had not known a woman could stand incorrectly until Luca placed her in front of a full-length mirror and made her look at herself for 40 silent minutes. Her reflection looked tired. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. Her blouse had wrinkled during the drive. There were shadows beneath her eyes from sleeping in small pieces and waking before dawn. Luca stood behind her, close enough that she could see him in the mirror, but not close enough to touch. He was careful that way. He entered a person's space without crossing the final inch. Somehow, that made him harder to ignore. "Your weight is on your back foot," he said. Avery stared at her reflection. "And that offends you. It tells people you are ready to retreat. I am ready to retreat. I know. That is why we are here." She shifted her weight. "Too much," Luca said. Avery breathed through her nose. "Do you have a setting between merciless and unbearable, Noma?" "Comforting." Again. So she stood again, shoulders back, chin level, feet planted, hands loose. Loose was the hardest part. Her fingers wanted to grip something. Her body wanted to fold inward. Her mouth wanted to explain that she was trying, that she had always tried, that trying had been the one thing she could offer people who asked her to become easier to love. Luca saw every flinch. "Stop asking the mirror for permission." "I'm not. You are." Avery faced herself again. The woman in the glass did not look powerful. She looked like a woman wearing the outline of someone braver. "What do you see?" Luca asked. "Me." "That is a lazy answer." Her jaw tightened. The word lazy caught somewhere old and tender. Carter had never called her lazy. He had preferred softer knives. Sweet, steady, simple. Not built for this life. Avery swallowed. "I see someone who does not know what she is doing." "Good." She looked at his reflection. "Good. Now we have something honest. Do you enjoy making people feel exposed?" "No." "You are very committed for a man who does not enjoy it." "I am not exposing you, Avery." His eyes held hers in the mirror. "I am showing you what they already saw so they cannot use it first." The room went quiet. Outside the glass, the river moved beneath a pale sky. Inside, Avery stood in a silence that felt like pressure against her ribs. After a while, Luca stepped away. "Again," he said. So she stood again. The third lesson was conversation. Luca called it social combat. Avery told him that sounded like something a man would say after making eye contact with an attorney too long. Mrs. Vale laughed from the hallway. It was a small sound, quick and dry. Luca did not smile, but his eyes shifted toward the doorway. "Mrs. Vale," he said. "I heard nothing," she replied. "That would be more convincing if you were not still standing there. I am old enough to know when entertainment is worth lingering for." Avery looked at Luca. "I like her." "That makes one of us," Luca said. Mrs. Vale entered carrying coffee and set a cup in front of Avery. "He likes me very much. He simply has the emotional vocabulary of a locked drawer." Avery nearly choked. Luca looked at the older woman with calm irritation. Mrs. Vale looked back at him as if he were still a boy with dirty shoes. Then she left them at the dining table. Luca opened a black notebook. "People at the wedding will not insult you directly," he said. "They will dress it beautifully. Concern, curiosity, compliments, polite questions with rotten centers." "So, politics." "Exactly." He leaned back. "I will be Evelyn Whitmore." Avery made a face. "That feels wrong." "It should." Then Luca changed. It was subtle. His shoulders relaxed. His mouth curved into a soft smile. His eyes warmed by one careful degree, but the warmth did not reach anything real. When he spoke, his voice was not Evelyn's voice, but it carried her poison perfectly. "Avery, darling, how brave of you to come." Avery's stomach dropped. She looked down before she could stop herself. Luca's own voice returned at once. "Dead." She snapped her eyes up. "Excuse me?" You looked down. "If Evelyn sees that she wins before the first toast." "That seems extreme. Rich people do not need knives when you hand them your throat." Avery rubbed her forehead. "You are impossible before noon." "I am consistent." He became Evelyn again. "Avery, darling, how brave of you to come." This time Avery held his gaze. "I would not miss it. Carter and I both ended up where we belong." Luca tilted his head, still wearing Evelyn's smile. "How mature of you. I worried this might be difficult." "It was," Avery said. "Then it stopped belonging to me." Luca's eyes sharpened. He dropped the act. "Better." The word landed too warmly in her chest. She looked down at the coffee. Luca tapped the notebook once. "Do not get hungry for praise. It makes you easy to feed and easier to starve." Avery looked up. "Do you ever say anything that does not sound like it belongs engraved above a prison gate?" "No." They practiced for hours. Luca became Evelyn, then Carter, then a bored judge's wife, then a drunk cousin with too much confidence and too little tact. He gave Avery questions that sounded harmless until they slipped under the skin. "Are you seeing anyone serious? Was the breakup sudden? Do you still work at that little law office? You must be relieved not to have the pressure of public life. Did Carter help you choose that dress?" At first, Avery answered too quickly, then too defensively, then too honestly. Luca stopped her every time. "Never hand them your wound," he said. "They will call it conversation and press their thumb into it." Avery leaned back, exhausted. "You make people sound awful." "They often are." "That is bleak. That is useful." She studied him across the table. "Who taught you that?" For the first time all morning, Luca did not answer immediately. His fingers rested beside the notebook. One tap, then stillness. "My father." The air changed. Avery waited. Luca's eyes moved toward the window where the Mississippi cut through the city like a dull silver blade. He could find weakness in anyone. Enemies, friends, children. He believed love was just leverage with better manners. Avery's voice softened before she could stop it. "Luca." He looked back at her. The door in his face closed. Again he said. So they continued. By the 7th day, Avery could answer Evelyn Whitmore without blinking. She could turn Carter's concern into embarrassment. She could smile at a veiled insult and return it polished enough to pass for grace. Luca was not satisfied. He never was. That afternoon, a woman named Celeste Hart arrived with garment bags, 2 assistants, and the air of someone who could identify insecurity by fabric choice. Avery stood in the guest suite while dresses were carried in one by one. Black. Too severe, Celeste said. Red. Too obvious, Luca said from the doorway. Ivory. Absolutely not, Avery said. Celeste lifted one brow. You have opinions. I have eyes. From the doorway, Luca said, Good. Avery turned. Are you supervising my wardrobe? Now I am supervising the entire operation. Of course you are. Celeste held up a deep sapphire gown. The room seemed to quiet around it. The dress was elegant without begging to be noticed. The fabric caught the light like dark water. The neckline was simple. The shape was clean. It looked like something a woman wore when she had stopped asking permission to be remembered. Avery touched the sleeve. This one, she said. Celeste studied her. It requires posture. I have been terrorized into posture for a week. Luca's mouth moved slightly. Celeste looked between them, too intelligent to miss what lived beneath the words. Try it on. When Avery stepped out, nobody gasped. Real life rarely gave a woman that kind of mercy. Instead, Celeste stopped adjusting the garment bag in her hand. Mrs. Vale paused at the doorway. Jonah, who had been passing through the hall, looked once and immediately looked away with a faint smile. Luca went still. That was worse than a gasp. Avery looked down at herself. Is it too much? No, Luca said. She looked at him. Just no. No correction. No sharp edge. No lecture. Heat rose in her face. Celeste began pinning the fabric and murmuring instructions to her assistant, but Avery barely heard her. Luca's gaze was not possessive. Not exactly. It was focused as if he had imagined this version of her before she knew it existed. Later, after Celeste left, Avery stood alone in the guest suite wearing her own clothes again. The sapphire dress hung from the wardrobe door like a dare. Her phone buzzed. Maya. Proof of life, please. Avery called her. Maya answered on the first ring. Tell me you still have all your organs. I tried on a dress, unless the dress was made of evidence that does not answer my concern. It was sapphire. A pause. Oh no. What you said, sapphire, like a woman in a romance novel right before she makes the worst decision of her life. Avery sat on the edge of the bed. I am not making decisions. That is usually how the worst ones happen. The concern beneath Maya's sarcasm made Avery's chest ache. He is not what I expected, Avery said. Dangerous men rarely are. That is how they get close enough. He listens. So do predators. He has not hurt me. Not all hurt starts loud. The room went quiet. Avery knew Maya was not trying to be cruel. She was trying to stand outside the fire and describe the flames. I know, Avery said. Do you? Avery looked at the closed door. She did not answer. That evening she found Luca on the balcony. New Orleans stretched beneath him in blue and gold. The river reflected the last of the light in broken lines. Music drifted faintly from somewhere below, a trumpet playing a song that sounded old enough to have outlived every heartbreak in the city. Luca stood at the railing with his sleeves rolled up. For the first time, Avery saw the scar near his ribs, pale and jagged, disappearing beneath the edge of his shirt. She should have turned away. Instead, she stepped outside. He did not look at her. You move quietly when you are trying not to be noticed. I thought I was getting better. You are. Then how did you know? Because you were trying. She joined him at the railing, leaving space between them. Who gave you that scar? Most people would have told her it was none of her business. Luca did not waste words on the obvious. My brother. Avery's breath caught. He looked over the city. He thought our father would choose him if I was dead. What happened? He was wrong. The answer chilled the air between them. Avery studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the shadows beneath his eyes. She had spent days being studied by him. Now she saw the cost of a man who had learned too young that love and danger could sit at the same table. I'm sorry, she said. I'm not. Yes, you are. His gaze cut to hers. Her heart kicked once. "Careful," he said. "Why do you say that every time I'm right? Because you do not know what being right can cost." The wind lifted a strand of hair across her cheek. Luca reached out, then stopped before touching her. The restraint was so visible it felt intimate. Avery should have stepped back. She did not. For one long second, the city disappeared beneath them. Then Luca lowered his hand. "Tomorrow we rehearse the entrance." Avery released a breath she had not meant to hold. "Of course we do." He turned toward the door. She caught his sleeve before thinking. Luca looked down at her hand. She let go at once. "Sorry." His eyes returned to her face. "Do not apologize unless you mean it." "I did mean it." "No," he said. "You panicked." The truth irritated her because it was true. She lifted her chin. "Fine. I panicked. Better. There it is again. What? That word. Better." She folded her arms. "Do you ever say anything fully kind?" Luca studied her in the balcony light. Then he said, "You are stronger than you think, sharper than Carter deserved, and too honest for the rooms you are about to enter." Avery went silent. Luca opened the balcony door. "Do not look so pleased. You asked for fully kind. You did not ask for gentle." He went inside. Avery stayed outside for a moment longer, smiling despite herself. The next day, the penthouse became a stage. Luca made her practice entering from the private elevator. Mrs. Vale stood near the dining room, pretending not to watch. Jonah sat on the sofa looking amused in a way that did not reach his mouth. Avery stepped out. Luca shook his head. Again. She stepped out. Too fast. Again. Too careful. Again. You looked at the floor. Again. By the time she did it right, she no longer felt like a woman walking into a room. She felt like the room had been waiting for her. Luca stood near the windows. Good. Avery stopped. Not better? Jonah gave a low whistle from the sofa. Promotion. Mrs. Vale disappeared into the kitchen, but Avery saw the smile before she turned away. Luca ignored them both. Now, with me. Avery's pulse changed. Luca crossed the room and offered his arm. Not his hand. His arm. It was formal, controlled, proper, somehow more dangerous than anything else. Avery slipped her hand around his elbow. The contact was light, but the effect was immediate. Luca was solid beside her, warm, steady. Every part of him carried certainty. Standing next to him felt like standing near a storm that had chosen for the moment not to break. "Do not lean into me," he said. "I'm not. You thought about it. That should not count. It counts." They walked together from the elevator to the windows. At first, Avery matched his pace poorly. Then she rushed. Then she overcorrected. Luca stopped. "You are trying to follow me. You are leading." "No." His voice lowered. "We are arriving together." That sentence did something to her. She looked up. His expression remained unreadable, but his eyes were not cold now. Again he said softer. So they walked again. This time Avery did not follow. She moved beside him. When they reached the windows, Luca looked down at her hand, still resting on his arm. Neither of them moved away. Jonah cleared his throat. "Should I leave, or are we all pretending the air did not just catch fire?" Avery pulled her hand back. Luca looked at Jonah with a calmness that felt murderous. Jonah stood. "Leaving." Mrs. Vale's voice floated from the kitchen. "Take your feet off the sofa before you die." For the first time since Avery had met him, Luca laughed. It was brief, low, almost unwilling, but it was real. Avery stared. Luca looked at her. "What?" "You laughed. I have laughed before. I doubt that." His mouth curved barely. Again. By the final evening before the wedding, Avery no longer recognized the rhythm of her life. Her apartment had become a place she slept in, not a place she returned to. Her old job had become a row of unread emails and one voicemail from her boss asking whether she planned to be dramatic much longer. Carter had become less of an open wound and more of a photograph left too long in sunlight fading at the edges. Luca had become the dangerous part of every day she looked forward to. That frightened her most. She stood in front of the mirror in the guest suite wearing the sapphire dress. Celeste had altered it perfectly. The fabric followed her body without clinging. Her hair was pinned low. Nora's ring rested at her throat. The woman in the mirror looked calm. Avery knew better. A knock sounded at the open door. Luca stood there in a black suit, his expression still as stone. For once, his eyes did not catalog flaws. They rested on her face. "You are ready," he said. Avery tried to laugh. It came out thin. "I do not feel ready. That does not matter. It matters to me." Luca stepped into the room, close but not touching. "You think courage feels clean?" he said. "It does not." Avery looked down at her fingers. They were trembling. Luca reached out and took one hand in his. His thumb brushed once across her knuckles. The room seemed to narrow around that touch. "Tomorrow you do not look for Carter first. You do not look for Evelyn. You do not search the room to see who approves of you." Avery's voice was quiet. "Who do I look at?" Luca's eyes held hers. "Me." The answer should have sounded arrogant. It did not. It sounded like shelter with teeth, like danger choosing to stand on her side. Avery swallowed. "And if I forget everything you taught me?" "You will not. You cannot know that. I can." "How?" His gaze dropped briefly to the ring at her throat, then returned to her face. "Because the woman who walked into my club wanted to borrow power for one night. The woman standing here would burn the room down before begging for a place in it." Avery's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not like she was delicate. Not like she was useful. Like she was dangerous in her own right. Luca released her hand and stepped back as if he had remembered himself too late. "The car leaves at 4. Avery nodded. He reached the door, then paused. "Avery." She looked at him. His voice was quieter now, rougher. "Do not let them make you miss who you used to be." Then he was gone. Avery turned back to the mirror. For a moment she saw the old version of herself. The woman who had sat on the kitchen floor after Carter left. The woman who had opened the wedding invitation and felt her name become a joke. The woman who had walked into the saint room with rain in her hair and desperation in her hands. She did not hate that woman. That woman had brought her here. That woman had survived long enough for this version to stand in her place. Avery touched Nora's ring at her throat. Outside the windows, New Orleans glittered like a city full of secrets. Inside the room, the sapphire dress weighted on her skin like armor. On the desk, the invitation lay where Luca had placed it that morning. Avery Collins and guest. Avery picked it up, looked at the gold lettering, and smiled without shaking. At 4 o'clock, the car waited downstairs, black and silent at the curb, as if it had been carved from the same storm that had brought Avery to Luca Moretti's door. The city was warm after the rain. New Orleans smelled of wet Stone River wind and the first sweetness of evening. Avery stepped out of Luca's building with Nora's ring resting against her throat and the sapphire dress moving around her legs like dark water. Jonah stood beside the rear door in a charcoal suit, his expression calm enough to make strangers nervous. He looked at Avery once. "Miss Collins." Avery lifted her chin. "That means I look good, right?" Jonah opened the door. "It means Mr. Moretti is going to make terrible decisions." From behind her, Luca said, "Careful." Jonah's mouth barely moved. "Always." Avery turned. Luca stood at the entrance in a black suit cut so perfectly it made every other man she had ever seen look unfinished. His shirt was white, his tie was dark. His hair was brushed back from his face, but one strand had already betrayed the effort and fallen near his temple. His eyes found her. For one breath, the sidewalk disappeared. The traffic, the doorman, Jonah, the smell of wet pavement. All of it fell away. Luca's gaze moved from her face to the ring at her throat and back again. "You are shaking," he said. Avery looked down at her hands. Barely still counts. I thought courage was supposed to shake." His eyes softened by one careful degree. "Only when it matters." She got into the car before that sentence could do too much damage. Luca joined her and the door closed with a quiet, expensive sound. The city narrowed behind tinted glass. The leather seats smelled faintly of cedar-cold air and Luca's cologne. Avery sat with her hands in her lap, trying not to wrinkle the dress, trying not to think of Carter, trying not to count every second between now and the moment she would see him standing beside another woman. Luca watched the road. For once, he did not speak first. That unsettled her more than his commands. "Do you have any last-minute instructions?" Avery asked. "Yes. Of course you do. Do not look for Carter when we arrive." She turned toward him. "That seems impossible. Most useful things are. What if he is the first person I see? Then you look through him." "That sounds dramatic. It is efficient." The car turned away from the river, moving toward the garden district. Ancient oaks bent over the streets like old witnesses. Iron gates guarded houses with white columns. Wide porches and lawns trimmed so precisely they looked disciplined. Avery had been in neighborhoods like this with Carter before, always standing a little closer to him than she wanted to, always waiting for someone to ask who she belonged to. Her hands began to tremble again. She folded them together. Luca noticed anyway. He reached across the seat and covered one hand with his. No audience, no need, no performance. That made the touch worse. And better. "You do not owe anyone in that house your pain," he said. Avery stared at their hands. His was larger, warmer, marked with faint scars across the knuckles. "What if I see him and it all comes back? Then let it pass through. Do not build a home for it." She looked at him. That almost sounded healthy. "I read one book once." Despite herself, Avery laughed. The sound loosened something in her chest. Then the Ashford estate appeared at the end of a long private drive. White stone, tall windows, perfect lawns rolling beneath old oak trees. Lanterns hung from branches. A wedding tent glowed behind the house, enormous and bright, with crystal chandeliers visible through white fabric walls. Valets moved between luxury cars. Guests stood in silk pearls and tailored linen holding champagne, as if they had been born knowing what to do with their hands. Avery felt her pulse climb into her throat. The car slowed. Luca's hand tightened once around hers. "Look at me." She did. Not down, not around. At me. The car stopped. A valet opened Luca's door. He stepped out first. Avery watched through the window as heads began to turn. Recognition moved through the nearest guests like ink dropped in water. Nobody shouted. Nobody gasped. These people were trained in the art of pretending surprise was vulgar. But they saw him. Luca Moretti did not need to introduce himself. He turned and offered his hand. Avery placed hers in it. Then she stepped out. Conversation did not stop, but it thinned. It bent around her. A woman in pale pink paused with her glass halfway to her mouth. A man near the steps looked at Luca, then Avery, then quickly away, as if eye contact might cost him something. The sapphire dress caught the evening light. Nora's ring rested at Avery's throat. Her spine stayed straight, because Luca had made her cross his penthouse floor until every muscle remembered how. Someone whispered her name. Someone else whispered his. Avery did not look toward either voice. Luca's hand rested at the small of her back, light enough to be polite, present enough to be unmistakable. "Ready?" he asked. "No." "Good." They walked up the stone steps together. Avery did not follow him. She arrived with him. At the entrance, Evelyn Whitmore waited in pale blue silk and pearls that looked inherited from women who had never carried their own bags. Her smile was perfect. Avery had once mistaken that smile for approval. "Never again," Avery Evelyn said, extending both hands as if greeting a beloved daughter. "What a lovely surprise." Avery let Evelyn take her hands for exactly 1 second. "You invited me." A flicker crossed Evelyn's face. Small, but there. "So we did," Evelyn said. "I simply was not certain you would feel comfortable attending. I appreciate your concern. I have outgrown needing it." Evelyn's smile tightened by a thread. Her gaze moved to Luca. "And you have brought a guest." Avery smiled. "Luca Moretti." "Luca, this is Evelyn Whitmore." Luca offered his hand. Evelyn had no choice but to take it. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Moretti. I believe I know your reputation. Most people only admit that when they need something." The sentence landed gently. That made it more dangerous. Evelyn withdrew her hand. "I was not aware you and Avery were acquainted." "There are many things you are not aware of," Luca said. The air changed. Avery felt it. So did Evelyn. Behind Evelyn, 2 women pretending not to listen suddenly found deep interest in their champagne. "The ceremony will begin soon," Evelyn said. "I hope you both enjoy the afternoon." "We intend to," Avery said. Evelyn looked at her, then really looked, perhaps for the first time in 2 years. Avery did not lower her eyes. When Evelyn walked away, Avery released the breath she had been holding. Luca leaned closer. "Very good. Do not sound so surprised." "I am not." She looked up at him. His mouth barely moved. "I am pleased." That was worse than praise. They entered the ceremony space behind the house where white chairs had been arranged beneath a canopy of flowers. The lake of guests shimmered with money perfume and polite cruelty. The sky above the oak trees had turned a deepening gold. A string quartet played something delicate enough to be expensive. Jonah appeared near the back, somehow already inside. Avery had stopped asking how he moved like that. Luca guided her to seats near the aisle, but not too close to the front. Avery sat and smoothed the dress over her knees. "Strategic," she murmured. "Visible without begging," Luca said. "Romantic. Accurate." Her heart was beating hard, but not wildly now. The first blow had landed. She was still standing. The music changed. The wedding party began. Bridesmaids in pale champagne dresses walked down the aisle with practiced smiles. Men in dark suits followed, each one polished, handsome, and forgettable in the exact same way. Then Carter appeared at the altar. Avery had imagined this moment so many times that seeing him in real life felt almost strange. He looked the same. Blonde hair carefully styled. Navy suit. Clean jaw. That public smile already waiting before anyone had earned it. Handsome in the way that made donors trust him and waiters forgive him. For a moment, pain rose. Not sharp. Not fresh. More like touching a scar and remembering the wound. Luca's hand found hers on the chair between them. He did not look at her. He simply laced their fingers together. Avery breathed. Carter looked across the guests. His gaze moved over faces, paused, passed on, then snapped back. He saw her. Then Luca. The smile on Carter's face faltered for half a second. Avery would have missed it once. She did not miss it now. The old part of her waited for satisfaction. It did not come. Instead, she felt distance, clean, strange distance. Carter Whitmore was no longer the center of the room. He was a man she had once mistaken for a door. Then the bride appeared. Madeline Ashford moved down the aisle on her father's arm. Her dress was flawless. Her veil floated behind her like mist. Her smile was soft and perfect, but Avery noticed her fingers first. They were tight around her bouquet, too tight. Her eyes did not search for Carter with joy. They moved once across the crowd, quick and controlled like a woman checking exits in a room where every door had already been claimed. Avery watched her and felt something unexpected loosen inside her. Madeline was not the villain. Maybe she was not even the winner. Maybe she was another woman dressed beautifully for a bargain everyone else had made. Carter took Madeline's hand. The ceremony began. Words about love drifted through the warm air. Partnership, devotion, choosing each other. Avery listened and wondered how many people in the audience believed them and how many simply appreciated a well-performed lie. When Carter spoke his vows, his voice was steady. Avery remembered that voice promising her a small house one day. Sunday pancakes, 2 children, maybe 3. A dog if Evelyn could be convinced to tolerate fur on expensive rugs. His promises had always sounded beautiful. She knew now that beauty and truth did not always enter the same room. Luca leaned slightly closer. "You are quiet," he murmured. "I am watching." And Avery looked at Madeline, then Carter. "I do not envy her." Luca's thumb moved once against her hand. That was all. When the ceremony ended, the guests stood. Applause rose like rainfall. Carter kissed Madeline and the quartet swelled as if music could make a transaction holy. The newly married couple turned and walked back down the aisle. As Carter passed Avery's row, his eyes met hers. This time, he did not look away quickly. He saw her sitting tall. He saw Luca's hand around hers. He saw no tears, no pleading, no proof that he had ruined her. Something tightened in his face. Avery gave him a small, calm smile. Then he was past her. Luca stood and offered his arm. She took it. The reception was held beneath the largest tent. Though tent felt too humble a word for a structure with crystal chandeliers, hardwood flooring, white roses, and a small orchestra tucked near the far side. Waiters moved with trays of champagne. Politicians laughed with donors. Women kissed cheeks without touching skin. Men clasped shoulders and measured usefulness in a glance. Avery knew this world. She had stood in its corners, carried its purses, smiled when Evelyn gave instructions disguised as suggestions. Today people stepped aside to let her pass. That was the first time she almost cried. Not because they respected her. Because she realized how much of respect was theater and how many years she had been denied even the costume. Luca bent his head. "Too much, no. You are lying." "Yes." "Do you want to leave?" Avery looked across the tent. Carter stood beside Madeline, accepting congratulations. Evelyn whispered to a woman in silver. Several guests watched Avery openly now. "No," Avery said. "I want a drink." Luca's eyes warmed. "There she is." They accepted champagne from a passing waiter. Avery took one sip and nearly coughed. "Expensive?" Luca asked. "Tastes like nervous fruit." Accurate. At their assigned table, Avery found herself seated with a retired judge, a real estate developer, a lobbyist's wife, and a woman who introduced herself as Carter's godmother, Lorraine Bell, but looked at Avery as if she had discovered an interesting stain. Dinner began with chilled soup Avery barely tasted. Lorraine waited until the first course arrived before smiling. "Avery Collins. I must say you look transformed." Avery lifted her glass. "How kind of you to notice. I only mean you seem very different from when we last saw you." "I am." The table went quiet. Lorraine waited for more. Avery gave her nothing. Luca's knee brushed hers beneath the table. Approval without applause. The lobbyist's wife turned to Luca. "And how did you two meet?" "Through shared interests," Luca said. The woman laughed lightly. "That sounds mysterious." It was. Avery took another sip of champagne to hide her smile. The retired judge studied Luca with careful eyes. "Moretti, are you in hospitality?" Among other things. The judge did not ask about the other things. Dinner passed in courses of polished silver white plates and conversations that never said what they meant. Every few minutes someone glanced from another table. Whispers moved and dissolved. Luca remained perfectly at ease, as if being watched were simply another kind of weather. Avery found that she was not pretending as much as she expected. She was nervous. Yes, but she was also awake. Painfully, vividly awake. Then the music changed. Carter and Madeline moved to the center of the floor for their first dance. They danced beautifully. Of course they did. Every step looked practiced. Every turn approved by someone with a clipboard and a family reputation to protect. When guests joined them, Luca stood. Avery looked up. "No. Yes. We did not practice this enough. We practiced. In your living room. Now we improve the scenery." He held out his hand. Refusing would draw more attention than accepting. Avery knew that. Luca knew she knew. She placed her hand in his. The dance floor opened around them. Luca guided her into the music with controlled ease. His hand settled at her waist. Hers rested against his shoulder. The fabric of his suit was warm beneath her palm. Avery focused on the steps. Luca focused on her. "You are counting," he said. "I do not want to step on you. I have survived worse. That is not comforting. You are doing fine." She looked up sharply. "Fine." His eyes held hers. Beautifully. Her breath caught. The word was too simple to defend against. They moved through the music and the room blurred at the edges. For the first time all day, Avery forgot to wonder who was watching. Luca's hand at her waist became less like a performance and more like a promise neither of them had agreed to say aloud. Across the floor, Carter danced with Madeline. His eyes found Avery over his bride's shoulder. Avery saw the question there. Not love, not regret exactly. Possession confused by absence. He had expected her pain to remain where he left it. It had moved on without asking him. Luca's voice brushed near her ear. "He is watching." "I know." "How does it feel?" Avery considered lying. Then she looked at Carter. Really looked. Nothing inside her broke. "It feels like I survived a man I mistook for a future." Luca's hand tightened at her waist. Good. After 2 songs, Avery needed air. Luca looked reluctant but let her go when she promised she was only stepping onto the terrace. The evening had cooled. Lanterns glowed along the garden path. Beyond the hedges, the old oak stood black against the deep blue sky. Music softened behind her, muffled by distance and expensive fabric. Avery stood alone for less than a minute. "Avery." She closed her eyes. Of course. Carter stood near the terrace doors with champagne in hand and concern arranged across his face. "You came," he said. "You invited me." "I was not sure you would." "I know." His gaze moved over her dress, her hair the ring at her throat. "You look different." "So you said with your face during the ceremony." His mouth tightened. "That is not fair." "No. It is accurate." He stepped closer. "This does not seem like you." Avery turned fully toward him. "Which part?" "The dress." "Luca, the fact that I am not crying." His expression shifted. "I am trying to look out for you. You ended our engagement to marry someone useful to your father, and now you are worried about me because I came with a man you cannot dismiss. Luca Moretti is dangerous. So are men who make women feel small and call it protection. Carter's jaw tightened. You do not know what you are getting involved in. No, Avery said. But for once I chose it myself. His hand reached for her arm. He barely touched her. Luca's voice cut through the terrace. Remove your hand. Carter froze. Luca stood in the doorway, black suit, dark eyes, all warmth gone from his face. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Carter released Avery at once, though he tried to make it look voluntary. We were talking. You were finished, Luca said. Carter glanced toward the tent where a few guests had begun to notice. Public humiliation was the only language men like him truly feared. Avery lifted her hand slightly, stopping Luca before he came closer. Then she looked at Carter. You told me I was not built for your life. His face changed. You were right, she said. I had to become smaller to fit inside it. Avery. No. I am grateful now. Not because you hurt me, because you made me see how much of myself I had already given away before you left. The words came calmly. That made them stronger. I hope Madeline gets more honesty from you than I did. Carter looked wounded. Avery no longer felt responsible for tending it. She walked past him and joined Luca at the terrace doors. Luca offered his hand. This time she took it without thinking. They crossed the reception together through chandeliers, music, whispers, and faces too polished to show surprise properly. Jonah appeared near the exit with Luca's coat already in hand. Outside, the night air touched Avery's skin. She did not realize she was shaking until Luca wrapped his coat around her shoulders. In the car, she looked back at the glowing estate. The wedding continued without her. Music, speeches, champagne, laughter. The life she had almost entered kept shining in the distance. It no longer looked like a dream. It looked like a beautiful house with locked doors. Luca sat beside her in silence for several minutes. Then he asked, Do you still love him? Avery watched the estate shrink through the rear window. No. Luca looked at her. She looked back. I think I loved who I became while trying to earn him. That is the part I am grieving. Luca's face softened for one unguarded second. Then his phone rang. The sound sliced through the quiet. He looked at the screen. Whatever he saw erased every trace of softness. He answered. Avery could not understand the voice on the other end, but she watched Luca's jaw harden, watched his gaze move from her to the dark road behind them. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Find Jonah. Lock down the docks. No one moves without my permission. Avery's fingers tightened around the edge of his coat. Luca ended the call and turned the phone over in his hand. The car kept moving through the night. What happened? Avery asked. Luca looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something in his eyes that looked almost like fear. The Whitmores were not the only people watching us tonight. Luca said it once, and the words seemed to remain inside the car long after his mouth closed. Avery looked from his face to the dark road behind them. Headlights drifted in and out of the rear window like distant eyes. A few minutes ago, she had been leaving a wedding in a sapphire dress with Luca's coat around her shoulders and the clean ache of finally surviving Carter Whitmore. Now the city outside the glass felt different. Every shadow had weight. Every passing car seemed to slow too long. What does that mean? She asked. Luca did not answer quickly. That frightened her more than if he had lied. The driver kept both hands on the wheel. New Orleans glimmered ahead low and wet and restless. Beside Avery, Luca sat perfectly still, but something in him had changed. His attention was no longer only on her. It had spread outward, filling the car, the street, the spaces between buildings. He looked like a man listening to threats no one else could hear. Luca. His eyes moved to hers. For 1 second she saw the man from the dance floor, the one who had told her she was doing beautifully. the one whose hand had rested at her waist like it belonged there. Then the wall came down. "It means you are going home," he said. The sentence landed cold. Avery blinked. "What?" "When we reach the city, Jonah will take you back to your apartment. You said we were going to the penthouse." "I changed my mind." "Because of that call?" "Yes." "Then tell me what happened." "No." The word was flat. Final. Avery stared at him, waiting for the explanation that did not come. The car entered the city again, passing beneath strips of orange streetlight. Luca's face appeared and vanished in the rhythm of the road, hard-shadowed, unreadable. "You do not get to do that," she said. His gaze cut to hers. "I do." "No. You do not get to put your coat on my shoulders. Hold my hand through the worst day of my life. Tell me people were watching us, then drop me at my apartment like a returned package." His jaw tightened. "I told you from the beginning this was temporary. You told me a lot of things, and you heard what you wanted." The cruelty was precise. It did not sound accidental. Avery felt it strike, then spread. For a moment she was back in that restaurant with Carter, listening to a man soften his voice around a blade. Her fingers curled around the edge of Luca's coat. Slowly she pulled it from her shoulders and folded it beside her on the seat. Luca looked at the coat. Something moved in his face. Not regret, not enough. The car stopped in front of her building. The bakery below her apartment was dark now. The striped awning dripped from the earlier rain. The street lamp near the curb buzzed weakly, throwing a yellow circle over the wet sidewalk. Her kitchen window glowed upstairs because she had forgotten to turn off the light. Jonah stepped out and opened her door. Avery did not move. She looked at Luca. "Say it honestly." His eyes were dark. "Say what?" "That you are sending me away because the job is done, not because you are scared." The silence changed shape. Jonah looked toward the street, suddenly very interested in nothing. Luca leaned closer, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "I am not a safe man to stand beside." "I know." "No," he said. "You like the idea of knowing. That is not the same." Avery swallowed, but she did not look away. "You think I do not understand danger because I spent my life filing court documents and smiling at people who forgot my name. That is not what I think. Then stop treating me like a child." He looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was ice. "You were useful tonight. You did what you came to do." The words hit harder than she expected. Useful, not brave, not strong, not beautiful. Useful. Avery nodded once. Her face stayed still because it had learned how. "Then do not worry," she said. "I know how to survive being useful to men." She stepped out of the car before he could answer. Jonah's expression did not change, but his eyes followed her with something almost like sympathy. Avery climbed the stairs without looking back. Inside her apartment, the quiet met her like a room full of people refusing to speak. She locked the door, then the deadbolt, then the chain. Her dress whispered around her legs. Nora's ring sat warm at her throat. The scent of Luca's cologne still clung faintly to her skin, and that made her angry enough to start shaking. She stood in the kitchen under the yellow light, still wearing the sapphire gown, and stared at nothing. For hours, she had walked through Carter's world and not broken. Now Luca had sent her home with one clean sentence and made her feel small again. Avery reached behind herself and unfastened the dress with shaking hands. The zipper caught once. She tugged too hard and the fabric scraped her skin. She stepped out of it and hung it carefully over the back of a chair because even anger had not made her careless. Then she changed into an old cotton shirt and sat on the kitchen floor, the same floor she had sat on after Carter left. Only this time she did not cry. That felt worse somehow. Her phone buzzed. "Maya, are you home?" Avery looked at the screen. Another message came. "I saw Jonah's car outside your building for 30 seconds, and I have questions with legal consequences." Avery typed back. "Home," Maya replied. "Did the wedding happen? Are you alive? Is Carter crying into inherited silver?" Avery almost smiled. Then another message arrived from an unknown number. "Lock your door." Avery stared at it. She knew it was Luca. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She typed. "Already did." The reply came at once. "Good." Avery waited. Nothing else. No explanation. No apology. No truth. She turned the phone face down on the floor. Across the city, Luca stood inside the private office of the Saint Room with his hands braced on the edge of his desk while Jonah delivered the report. The club was locked down. No music. No guests. No bourbon glasses left half full under amber lights. Men moved quietly through the halls with guns beneath their jackets and eyes fixed on corners. Jonah placed a photograph on the desk. It had been taken from across the Ashford estate lawn. Grainy, distant, but clear enough. Avery stepping out of the car. Luca offering his hand. Avery looking like dark water and quiet war. Another photograph followed. Luca's hand at the small of her back. Another. Avery and Luca dancing. Another. Carter standing on the terrace while Luca appeared in the doorway. Luca stared at the images without touching them. Jonah's voice was even. "They were sent to the dock office 20 minutes after we left the estate. From Silas. That is the assumption." Luca lifted his eyes. Jonah corrected himself. "That is the fact." Luca looked back at the photographs. There was a message written on the back of the last one in black marker. "Pretty things break loudest." The room seemed to lower around him. Jonah waited. Men who did not know Luca well thought silence meant calm. Jonah knew better. Silence was where Luca put the violence until he decided where it belonged. "How did Rourke know she mattered?" Luca asked. Jonah said nothing. Luca looked at him. Jonah's mouth tightened. "Because you looked at her like she did." The truth did not need volume. Luca turned away toward the window. Beyond the glass, New Orleans carried on with its usual lies. Music somewhere, rainwater in the gutters, laughter rising from a bar that would not remember its own sins by morning. Silas Rourke had been circling for years. Old Gulf Coast blood, dock money, judges with gambling debts, sheriffs who looked away when containers moved too cleanly through the wrong ports. His father had once done business with Luca's father back when men settled agreements with cigars, handshakes, and bodies in marshland. Silas did not want money. He had money. He wanted Luca to make a mistake. Avery had given him a reason to believe Luca finally might. "Put men on her building," Luca said. Jonah did not move. Luca turned. "Now. She will notice. I know. She will hate it. I know." Jonah studied him. "And when she calls you Luca," picked up the photograph of Avery stepping from the car. The sapphire dress had caught the light. Her head was lifted. Her hand rested in his. For one dangerous moment he remembered the weight of her fingers. Then he placed the photograph face down. "I will answer." Avery noticed the man across the street at 11 the next morning, not because he was obvious, because he was too still. He stood near the corner pretending to smoke beneath the bakery awning across from hers. He had the wrong shoes for the neighborhood and the wrong posture for waiting. New Orleans was a city of movement. Even its laziness had rhythm. This man did not. Avery stood at her upstairs window wearing jeans, a sweater, and the expression of a woman who had slept badly enough to become fearless out of irritation. She called Luca. He answered on the first ring. If you want to stalk me, she said, have the decency to do it yourself. A brief silence. You are in danger. Then tell me why. The answer will not make you safer. No. But lies make me stupid, and I am done being made stupid by men who say they are protecting me. His breathing changed. Avery looked down at the street. The man across the way lifted his phone as if checking a message. You have 30 minutes, she said. Then I am walking outside and asking your friend if he prefers coffee or a restraining order. Avery. She ended the call. 22 minutes later, Luca knocked on her apartment door. Avery opened it with the chain still latched. He stood in the hallway in a black coat, no tie, dark eyes moving over her face with the controlled urgency of a man trying not to show that he had imagined her dead. She did not remove the chain. You look terrible, she said. You are angry. That was not a denial. His mouth tightened. Let me in. No. Luca blinked once. Avery almost enjoyed it. No, he repeated. Correct. You remember the word. You used it often last night. His jaw worked. Avery, this is not the time. It never is when men owe women explanations. For a moment she thought he might order. Push. Command. Instead, Luca looked at the chain between them, then at her. Silas Rourke saw us at the wedding. The name meant nothing to her but the way he said it did. Who is he? A man who has been trying to cut into my city for years. Your city. His eyes held hers. Yes. What does he want to prove I can bleed? Avery looked past him to the empty hallway. And I am what? A knife. Luca said nothing. That was answer enough. She closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it again. Come in. He entered her apartment slowly, as if the smallness of it required respect. Avery watched his eyes move over everything. The chipped mug in the sink, the crooked bookshelf, the stack of legal files on the table, the soft yellow curtains her grandmother had sewn years ago, the photograph of Nora on the wall, the plant near the window that had survived mostly out of spite. Luca looked too large in her kitchen, too dark, too expensive, too used to rooms obeying him. This is where you live, he said. It is. I had Jonah pull the address. I know. That bothered you. Everything about you bothers me. Some things simply have better lighting. His gaze moved to her. There was tiredness beneath the control now. Not weakness. Never that. But strain. Avery folded her arms. Tell me what Silas knows. He knows your name. He knows where you live. He knows you were with me. He knows I touched you in public. That is enough. For men like him, yes. She looked toward the window. The man across the street was gone. You sent security without asking. Yes. You decided I was safer if I did not know why. Yes. You sent me away last night and called me useful because you were scared. Luca's face went still. Avery stepped closer. Say it. His voice came low. I was scared. The words did not fix it, but they changed the air. Avery looked down first. I hate that you made me feel like Carter did. Pain moved across his face so quickly she might have missed it if she had not been looking. I know. Do you? Yes. No, Luca. Do you understand that control can look like protection when a man has enough money to make the cage comfortable? He did not answer. Avery's voice softened, though she did not mean for it to. I will not trade Carter's polished little cage for your beautiful, dangerous one. Luca looked around the apartment again. At her life. Her small, stubborn life. The one she had built without him. When he spoke, his voice was rougher. I do not know how to protect what matters without putting walls around it. I am not what Luca. His eyes returned to hers. I am not a thing that matters. I am a person." He nodded once, slowly, like the words cost him something to accept. "All right." Avery almost laughed. "That is it, no. But it is where I can start." That afternoon he brought Riley Knox. Riley arrived in a plain gray shirt, dark pants, and boots that looked like they had kicked indoors without bragging about it. She had short brown hair, a scar beneath her chin, and the calm expression of a woman who had once survived something and decided never to be surprised again. She looked Avery up and down in the small training room above one of Luca's closed restaurants near the river. "This her?" Riley asked. Luca's eyes cooled. "Careful." Riley ignored him. Avery lifted a brow. "I am standing here." Riley looked at her then. Really looked. "Good. Then you can answer. You want to survive this?" Avery glanced at Luca, then back at Riley. "Yes." "Then stop looking at him before you answer." Avery's face warmed. Luca said nothing. Riley tossed her a set of keys. Avery caught them awkwardly. "You do not need to become dangerous," Riley said. "You need 1 second. 1 second for what? To run, to scream, to hit, to live." For the next 2 hours, Riley taught Avery ugly things. How to break a wrist grip. How to turn a key between her fingers without cutting herself. How to use her heel against an instep. How to aim for the throat, the knee, the eyes. How to notice exits. How to distrust empty hallways. How to stop freezing when a hand grabbed her arm. The first time Riley seized her from behind, Avery went rigid. Riley released her at once. "No shame," she said. Avery bent forward, breathing hard. Luca moved. Riley pointed at him without looking. "Stay there." He stopped. Avery saw the effort it took. Riley crouched in front of her. "Your body is not betraying you. It is remembering something. We teach it a new ending." Avery swallowed. Again she thought. The word had become a door. She stood. "Do it again." Riley grabbed her. This time Avery moved. Not gracefully, not perfectly, but she moved. By evening her wrist ached, her throat was dry, and Luca had watched every second with the quiet violence of a man learning that love could mean standing still while someone else fought. When they left, Avery walked beside him down the back stairs. "You hated that," she said. "Yes. Good." He looked at her. She looked back. "Now you know how it feels." Something almost like respect moved in his eyes. "I deserved that. You did." They reached the alley. Luca opened the car door but did not touch her. Avery noticed. So did he. Days blurred after that. Security appeared at the edges of Avery's life. Not close enough to smother. Close enough to remind her that danger had a schedule and she was on it. Jonah drove her when Luca could not. Riley trained her in the afternoons. Maya came over at night with food and suspicion. The first time Maya met Luca in Avery's kitchen, she looked him up and down with all 5 feet 4 inches of her floral shop fury. "So you are the reason my best friend is learning how to stab men with keys." Luca inclined his head. "Among other things. I do not like you. I assumed. I mean it. I believed you the first time." Maya narrowed her eyes. "If you make her small again, I do not care how many men you have. I will find a way to ruin your day." Luca looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Good." Maya blinked. Avery closed her eyes. "Please do not bond over threatening each other." But the danger tightened. A black car followed Avery and Jonah for 6 blocks before disappearing. A photograph of her apartment door arrived at Luca's phone. 2 men were found asking about the bakery owner downstairs. Someone left a white rose on Avery's doorstep with every thorn cut cleanly off. No note. None was needed. That night, Luca came to her apartment and found Avery standing at the sink staring at the flour lying in the trash. "You are leaving tonight," he said. Avery did not turn. "No." "Avery, no." His voice hardened. "This is not pride." She faced him. "And this is not leadership. This is fear wearing expensive shoes." For once, anger broke through his control. "I am trying to keep you alive. Then treat me like a person who wants to live, not a possession you are afraid to lose." The room went silent. Luca's hands curled once at his sides, then opened. He looked at the rows in the trash. "There is a safe house outside the city," he said. "One night. Jonah will be there. Riley will be there. You say the word and you leave." Avery studied him. "That better be a promise, not a line." His eyes held hers. "For you it is a vow." The safe house sat near the bayou, an old raised cottage hidden behind cypress trees and a rusted iron gate. Spanish moss hung from the branches like torn lace. The air smelled of mud rain and green things growing where people forgot to look. Avery arrived near midnight with Jonah driving and Riley in the passenger seat. Luca followed in another car. Avery did not ask if that was for her protection or his sanity. Inside the house was clean and spare. Shuttered windows, reinforced doors, a bedroom with white sheets, a kitchen stocked with food no one seemed likely to eat. The lamps gave off warm light, but the corners still felt too dark. Riley checked every room. Jonah walked the perimeter. Luca stood near the front window phone in hand, speaking quietly to someone in a language Avery did not know. Avery watched him. He looked less like a lover here, and more like the man everyone else feared. That should have comforted her. It did not. When he ended the call, she said, "You are doing it again." What leaving the room while standing in it? His gaze moved to hers. She sat on the edge of the sofa. "I am scared too," she said. "You are not the only one allowed to become difficult because of it." Luca crossed the room but stopped a few feet away. "I do not know how to do this," he said. The honesty made her chest ache. "Do what?" "Care for someone without turning the world into a threat map." Avery looked at him. The rain began softly against the shutters. "Start smaller," she said. He waited. "Sit with me." Something in his face shifted. He sat beside her, not touching, just there. For a while, that was enough. Near 3 a.m, the lights went out. The whole house dropped into black. Avery woke on the sofa with her heart already racing. For 1 second, she did not know where she was. Then Riley's voice cut through the dark. "Down." Avery rolled off the sofa as glass shattered in the kitchen. Gunfire cracked through the house, loud, brutal, close. Luca grabbed Avery by the arm and pulled her behind the overturned coffee table. Jonah shouted from the hall. Riley fired twice. The muzzle flashes lit the room in pieces. A chair on its side. Luca's face hard with focus, rain streaking the window. Avery's own hand flat against the floor, fingers spread Nora's ring cold against her chest. "Stay behind me," Luca said. "No." His head snapped toward her. Avery's voice shook, but it came out. "No." Another shot tore through the wall. Riley cursed. Jonah appeared in the doorway, blood running down one side of his face. "Back exit," he said. "Now." They moved through the dark. Avery kept low. Her bare foot struck broken glass, pain flashing white up her leg, but she did not stop. Luca's hand hovered near her back without pushing. That mattered even in terror. They reached the kitchen. A man burst through the rear door. Riley hit him first. Another grabbed Avery from the side. His hand clamped around her wrist. For one breath, her body tried to freeze. Then Riley's voice rose in her memory. "Your body is remembering something. teach it a new ending. Avery twisted toward the thumb, drove her knee hard, and tore herself free. The man grunted. She grabbed a lamp from the counter and smashed it across his face. He fell against the wall. Luca was suddenly there, gun raised, eyes black. Avery grabbed his sleeve. "Move." He did. They ran into the rain. The bayou air swallowed sound strangely. The storm turned the trees into shadows. Jonah fired from the porch. Riley shouted Avery's name. Avery ran toward the tree line. Her foot burned. Her lungs tore. Her wet hair stuck to her face. She almost made it. A figure stepped from behind a cypress tree. Tall, gray coat, silver hair, calm smile. Silas Rourke. He looked nothing like Avery had imagined. Not monstrous, not wild. He looked like a wealthy uncle at a funeral, elegant and patient, and pleased to find grief on schedule. "Avery Collins," he said. She stopped so quickly she slipped in the mud. Behind her, gunfire cracked again. Silas held a gun, but not pointed at her. He did not need to. Two men emerged from the trees. Avery looked back once. Through the rain, she saw Luca fighting toward her. Their eyes met. For one brutal second, everything was clear. Then a cloth covered Avery's mouth. She drove her elbow back, but the man behind her was larger. Her lungs filled with sharp chemical sweetness. The world tilted. Silas stepped closer, watching her like an experiment finally proving itself. "Luca Moretti taught you how to stand tall," he said. Avery tried to breathe. Her knees weakened. Silas smiled. "Let us see if he taught you how to fall." The rain became light, then sound, then nothing. When Avery woke, the first thing she felt was cold metal beneath her cheek. The second was pain. Her wrists were tied behind her. Her ankle throbbed. Her mouth tasted like blood and chemicals. Somewhere nearby, water dripped steadily into a shallow puddle. She opened her eyes. A warehouse ceiling stretched above her beams, lost in darkness. A single hanging light swung slowly overhead. The air smelled of river rot oil and rust. Rain hammered the roof in hard waves. Avery pushed herself upright with a gasp. Her hands were tied to the back of a chair now. Rope bit into her skin. Her grandmother's ring still hung at her throat. She closed her fingers around it as much as the rope allowed. Across from her, Silas Rourke sat on a crate with one polished shoe resting on the other knee. He held a white rose in his hand. All its thorns had been cut away. "You are awake," he said. Avery forced her voice through a dry throat. Disappointed. His smile widened. "I see why he likes you. If you think Luca likes me because I make jokes while tied to furniture, you do not know him very well." "No," Silas said. "I know him better than you do." Avery looked around. Two men stood near the far wall. Another smoked by a loading bay door. Beyond it, she could hear the river slapping against pilings. "You are not the prize, Miss Collins," Silas said. Avery looked back at him. "Then what am I?" He stood and walked toward her slowly. "The knife I press against him until he cuts himself open." Avery's heart pounded so hard it hurt. But she lifted her chin. Fear moved through her. So did anger. So did the memory of Luca's voice in the mirror. "Stop asking the room for permission." Avery looked Silas Rourke in the eye. "Then you picked the wrong woman to hold." For a moment, no one moved. The hanging light swung above them slow and uneven, dragging shadows across the warehouse floor. Rain struck the metal roof in hard sheets. Somewhere beyond the loading doors, the river knocked against the pilings like a fist that had forgotten what it wanted to break. Silas smiled. It was not amusement. It was appetite. "I hope you believe that," he said. Avery kept her chin raised even though her wrists burned and her left foot throbbed with every beat of her heart. "I do." Silas stepped closer and brushed the white rose against the side of her chair. All the thorns had been cut away, leaving the stem smooth and strange. Luca built a kingdom on fear, Silas said. Men follow him because they think he cannot be touched. Then you appeared at that wedding in blue silk, and for the first time in years, he looked touchable. Avery said nothing. Silence had become a weapon Luca taught her without meaning to. Silas tilted his head. You know what men like Luca do when something precious is taken from them? Avery's fingers shifted behind the chair. The rope was tight but not perfect. She had been working it slowly against the edge of her grandmother's ring since waking. Every movement hurt. Every movement gave her one thread. They make mistakes, Silas said. They walk into rooms without counting exits. They trade strategy for anger. They become ordinary. Avery's pulse pounded in her ears. You do not want Luca ordinary, she said. Silas leaned in. No, I want him predictable. A sound came from outside. Not loud, just wrong. One of Silas's men near the loading bay lifted his head. Avery noticed because fear had sharpened the room around her. The man by the door moved his hand beneath his jacket. Another man near the wall stopped smoking. Silas did not turn, but his smile faded by one careful inch. Then the lights went out. The warehouse dropped into black. Gunfire cracked through the dark. Men shouted. Glass shattered somewhere high above. The hanging lights sparked once, then swung dead. Avery threw herself sideways with the chair as the first shot tore through the space where her head had been. She hit the floor hard. Pain flashed through her shoulder. The chair cracked beneath her weight but did not break. She heard Luca before she saw him. Not his voice, his presence. The room changed around him. Silas shouted orders. Boots slammed against concrete. Men moved through the dark, but Luca's men moved quieter. Jonah's voice cut through the chaos from somewhere near the east wall. Left side clear. Riley answered from above. 2 on the stairs. 2 shots followed. Avery rolled onto her side, dragging the broken chair with her. Her wrists screamed. The rope was slick, now wet with blood from where the ring had cut into her skin. She pressed the ring harder against the fibers. 1 second. Riley's voice lived inside her. You only need 1 second. A muzzle flash lit the warehouse for an instant. Avery saw Luca near a row of rusted containers, black coat soaked from the rain, gun in hand, face cold with a kind of focus that made him look carved from the storm itself. His eyes found her. The entire warehouse seemed to narrow between them. Avery. His voice did not rise, but she heard it anyway. I am fine, she shouted. A bullet struck the concrete near her, sending sparks into the dark. Luca turned and fired once. The man who had aimed at her dropped. Avery kept working the rope. Silas appeared behind Luca, moving between shadows with a gun raised. Avery did not think. She twisted her wrist until pain burst white behind her eyes. The ring caught one final strand. The rope gave. Her right hand tore free. She grabbed a broken piece of chair leg and threw it as hard as she could. It struck a metal drum near Luca. The sound made him turn. Silas fired. The bullet missed Luca by inches and shattered a window behind him. Luca's gaze snapped to Silas. The 2 men stared at each other through rain blown in from the broken glass. There you are, Silas called. Luca moved toward him. Avery freed her other hand and scrambled behind a stack of crates. Her ankle nearly folded beneath her. She bit down on a cry and kept moving. One of Silas's men grabbed her from behind. His arm locked around her throat. Her body wanted to freeze. Not this time. Avery drove her heel down on his foot. When his grip loosened, she turned her chin, shoved her elbow into his ribs, then struck upward with the heel of her palm. His head snapped back. She pulled free and ran. She did not run gracefully. She ran alive. Across the warehouse, Luca saw her move and changed direction at once. Not to take over. Not to drag her behind him. He adjusted around her, creating space, firing only when a man turned toward her path. He was not saving her like cargo. He was fighting beside her. That difference burned through her fear like light through smoke. Jonah caught her near a concrete pillar. Blood ran from a cut at his temple, but his voice remained calm. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "You are lying." "Yes." "Good enough." He handed her a small knife. Avery stared at it. Jonah said, "Do not stab me." Despite everything, a laugh almost broke out of her. He guided her behind cover as Riley dropped from a steel stairway above them, landing with the quiet violence of a woman who had been born unimpressed. Riley looked Avery over. "You got out." Avery held up the knife with shaking fingers. "Mostly." "Good girl." Avery looked past her. Luca and Silas had disappeared behind a row of shipping containers near the open loading doors. The rain was louder there. River wind swept through the gap. Avery moved before either Riley or Jonah could stop her. "Avery," Jonah said. She did not turn. By the time she reached the loading bay, Silas was on his knees near the edge of the dock, blood on his mouth, one hand pressed to his side. Luca stood over him with a gun pointed beneath his jaw. The river churned behind them, black and restless. Silas laughed softly. "Go on," he said. "Be what your father made." Luca's hand did not shake. That was what frightened Avery. "Luca." His eyes did not leave Silas. "Turn around." "No." "Avery." "No." Rain soaked her hair and ran down her face. Her bare foot left red marks on the wet concrete. Luca's voice dropped. "He took you, and I am still here. He touched you, and I am still here. He does not breathe after that." Silas smiled through the blood. Avery stepped closer. "If you kill him because of me, he owns the ending." Luca's jaw tightened. "He does not own anything." "Yes, he does. If this is how it ends, he gets exactly what he wanted. He wanted you angry. He wanted you predictable. He wanted to prove that all anyone has to do is hurt what you love, and you become your father's son." The gun stayed where it was. The rain kept falling. Avery's voice softened. "You told me not to let them make me miss who I used to be." Luca finally looked at her. His eyes were black with fury, but beneath it was something raw and almost young. Avery held his gaze. "Do not let him make you miss who you could become." Silas laughed once. "You listen to her now." Luca looked back at him. For one terrible second, Avery did not know what he would choose. Then Luca lowered the gun. The sound Silas made was not relief. It was rage. Riley stepped in from the shadows with 2 armed men behind her. Jonah followed, phone pressed to his ear. "Federal unit is 5 minutes out," Jonah said. Avery looked at Luca. He had planned this. Not all of it. Not the fear. Not her pain. But enough. Silas stared at Luca, breathing hard. "You called the law?" Luca looked down at him. "I called men who already hated you. I only gave them permission to be useful." Silas spit blood onto the dock. "You think this makes you clean?" "No," Luca said. "It makes you finished." The first sirens rose in the distance. Avery's strength left her all at once. Her knees gave. Luca caught her before she hit the ground. This time she did not pull away. His arms closed around her carefully, as if every part of him feared causing more pain. "I have you," he said. Avery pressed her face against his wet coat. "I know." He went still around those 2 words. Then he lifted her and carried her out of the rain. Dawn found them back at Luca's penthouse. The city below was washed clean and lying about it. The Mississippi moved under a pale gray sky. Somewhere far beneath the glass, cars started their morning routes. Bakeries unlocked their doors, and people stepped into ordinary lives as if the night had not cracked open and shown its teeth. Avery stood by the window wearing one of Luca's shirts and bandages around both wrists. Her ankle was wrapped. Her hair was damp from a shower she barely remembered taking. Nora's ring rested against her chest. Luca stood several feet away. That distance mattered. He had not touched her without asking since the warehouse. Not when the doctor examined her. Not when Mrs. Vale brought blankets with red eyes she pretended were allergies. Not when Maya arrived in the middle of the night and hugged Avery so hard the room itself seemed to exhale. Now the penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. Avery looked at Luca's reflection in the glass. "You are standing over there like I am going to break." His voice was rough. "I watched them take you. I know. I heard you scream. I know." His hands curled once at his sides. "I love you." The words entered the room without armor. Avery turned. Luca looked like a man who had faced bullets with less fear than this sentence. "I do not know how to do it cleanly," he said. "I do not know how to love without wanting to put walls around what matters. I do not know how to stand beside someone and not prepare for every way the world might steal her." Avery said nothing. He took one breath. "But I know this. You are not my weakness. You are the first thing that made me want to be stronger without becoming crueler." Her eyes burned. She looked down at her bandaged wrists. "I love you too." His face changed. Before he could move, she lifted one hand. "But love does not mean I disappear into your life. No, it does not mean you decide what I can survive. No, it does not mean you protect me by lying. Never again." Avery stepped closer, slowly. Her ankle ached. Her wrists burned. Her heart felt bruised and open and alive. "You do not get to turn fear into orders. I know. You do not get to send me away because you are scared of what I mean to you. I know. You do not get to call me useful again." Pain crossed his face. Never. Only then did Avery cross the last space between them. She kissed him first. Luca did not grab her. He did not pull her in like a man claiming what fear had almost taken. He held still for half a breath, waiting, letting her decide the shape of the moment. Then his hands came to her waist, gentle and shaking. Avery felt the tremor and understood. This was not the dangerous part of him. This was the human one. The weeks after the warehouse did not turn gentle all at once. Avery hated sudden noises. She woke more than once with her hand at her throat, fingers searching for Nora's ring. She avoided the smell of white roses. She limped for 10 days and got angry every time Luca noticed before she did. He noticed anyway. He learned not to say something every time. That was harder for him than most wars. Maya came over often and filled the penthouse with grocery bags, blunt opinions, and the kind of affection that did not ask permission. The first time she found Luca in Avery's kitchen trying to make coffee, she watched him burn it with the solemn focus of a man defusing a bomb. "You have survived assassins," Maya said, "but not breakfast." Luca looked at the coffee pot. "It is more complicated than it appears." "No, it is not." Avery laughed from the table. The sound surprised all three of them. Mrs. Vale stopped in the doorway, one hand pressed lightly to her chest. Then she walked away before anyone could comment. Avery returned to her apartment 2 weeks later, not to stay forever, to choose. Luca came with her, but he waited outside while she packed. She wanted to touch every object herself, the chipped mugs, the old books, the legal files she no longer planned to finish, the yellow curtains Nora had sewn. She stood in the middle of the small living room and let herself feel the weight of leaving. This apartment had held the woman who cried after Carter. It had held the woman who walked into the saint room. It had held the woman who came home from the wedding and refused to break. She did not want to abandon that woman like something embarrassing. So she packed slowly. When she opened the door, Luca was leaning against the hallway wall. He straightened. Ready? Avery looked back once. Yes. He reached for the box. She lifted one brow. He stopped. May I? Avery smiled. Yes. He took it carefully. Months passed. Avery quit the law office where reliable had meant invisible. She began working with a non-profit that helped women leave controlling relationships and rebuild legal independence. The office was small, loud, and always low on funding. The coffee was terrible. The printer jammed twice a day. The women who came in often spoke softly at first, as if their own lives might punish them for being heard. Avery knew that voice. So she listened. Not as someone who had all the answers, as someone who knew what it meant to mistake a cage for a future, because the cage had beautiful lighting. Luca changed too, though never loudly. He moved pieces of his business into cleaner hands. He cut ties that had once seemed necessary. Men who had followed him out of fear began watching him with suspicion. A few left. One betrayed him. Jonah handled that with calm efficiency and did not tell Avery the details until she asked. Luca told her when she asked, every time. The truth was not always pretty, but it was truth. One evening, nearly a year after the wedding, Avery returned to the Saint Room. The black door looked the same. Polished wood, brass handle, no sign. Rain had begun again soft this time, tapping against the alley stones. Avery stood beneath the awning and looked at the place where she had once arrived, soaked, desperate, and holding a wedding invitation like a wound. Luca opened the door himself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Avery smiled. You are the doorman now. For you, apparently. Promotion punishment. She stepped inside. The club was empty except for low amber lights and a single table near the back. Their table. On it lay the old wedding invitation. Avery Collins and guest. Avery walked toward it slowly. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges. The gold lettering still looked proud of itself. Beside it was a new envelope. Her name was written across the front in Luca's hand. She looked back at him. He gave nothing away. Avery opened it. Inside was a card. Avery Collins and whoever she chooses to become. Her throat tightened. When she looked up, Luca was on one knee. No audience, no performance, no power game. Just the man who had once opened a dangerous door and the woman who had learned she did not need permission to walk through it. Luca held out a ring. Not too large, not too loud. A blue stone set in gold, close enough to Nora's ring to honor it, different enough to belong to Avery's life now. I do not want to own your future, Luca said. I want to be invited into it. Avery's eyes filled. That was almost gentle. His mouth curved. I am improving. Slowly. Say yes, and I will keep practicing. She laughed through the tears. Yes. Luca slipped the ring onto her finger with hands steadier than his eyes. Then Avery pulled him up and kissed him under the amber light where everything had started as a lie and become something neither of them knew how to pretend away. Years later, Avery stood on a balcony above New Orleans with the river shining beneath the morning sun. Luca stood beside her with their daughter Nora asleep against his shoulder. The little girl had dark curls, stubborn hands, and the terrifying ability to make Luca Moretti obey a whispered demand for pancakes. Maya said it was justice. Mrs. Vale said it was discipline arriving late. Jonah said nothing, but he always brought the child wooden toys from cities he refused to admit he had visited. Avery touched the ring at her throat, then the one on her finger. Below, the city woke in music heat and secrets. Once she had needed a dangerous man to stand beside her so the world would stop pitying her. Now Luca shifted closer, careful not to wake their daughter. Avery looked at him and smiled. You are staring. I am. Why? His eyes moved over her face with the same intensity he had carried from the beginning, only now it no longer felt like inspection. It felt like wonder. because you still look like a problem," he said. Avery laughed softly and turned toward the city. For who Luca kissed their daughter's hair, then looked at his wife as the sun rose over New Orleans. For everyone who expected you to arrive as an apology. Avery leaned against the balcony rail, Nora's ring warm at her throat. Luca beside her, the city below them bright and unrepentant. She had walked into Carter Whitmore's wedding to prove she had survived being left. She had walked out knowing survival was only the beginning. The rest of her life did not wait for permission. Neither did she.